Tonight, refusing to resign, mounting calls for the Speaker of the House to step down for honoring a man with Nazi ties. The glaring vetting breakdown.
This is something that is deeply embarrassing.
And the deepening international implications of the blunder.
I'm deeply sorry that I've offended many.
Children across Canada languishing on wait lists.
They're hoping within a year, but they can't really give us a time.
A growing backlog of urgently needed spinal surgeries. Plus, setting the stage to end the strike that brought Hollywood to a halt.
It seemed like no writers were really left behind here.
A tentative new deal for writers, but the spotlight's still on the actors' dispute.
CTV National News with Omar Sachedina.
Good evening, everyone. It is extremely rare for the Speaker of the House, whose role it is to remain fair and impartial, to be at the center of a political storm. But even after apologizing in the House today for inviting and recognizing a man who fought for the Nazis during the Ukrainian president's speech to Parliament on Friday, Anthony Rota is facing intensifying calls to resign. Our coverage begins with CTV's Annie Bergeron-Oliver on the backlash.
In the House of Commons, an apology for an egregious error receiving worldwide condemnation.
I wish to apologize to the House, and I'm deeply sorry that I've offended many with my gesture and remarks.
On Friday, parliamentarians and invited guests packed into the chamber to hear Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy speak. Among the guests invited by the Speaker and later praised by parliamentarians, 98-year-old Yaroslav Hunka.
Ukrainian-Canadian world veteran from the Second World War who fought the Ukrainian independence against the Russians.
It turns out Hunka served in a volunteer Nazi military unit linked to massacres of civilians, mainly Jews, in Poland during the Second World War.
For me, such people should not be present in public life and probably should be prosecuted.
The Speaker of the House, Anthony Rota, says he sent the invite on his own. The NDP and the Bloc say an apology isn't enough. They want his resignation.
I believe a sacred trust has been broken. It's for that reason, for the good of the institution of the House of Commons, that I say, sadly, I don't believe you can continue in this role.
But so far that hasn't happened, and the Liberals haven't called for it either.
The Speaker has acknowledged his mistake and has apologized. But this is something that is deeply embarrassing to the Parliament of Canada and, by extension, to all Canadians.
The government says it was not aware of the invite, nor was anyone in the Ukrainian delegation. Benai Brith calls the situation beyond outrageous.
As a descendant of Jewish Holocaust survivors, I am personally very hurt by the fact that this chamber recognized this individual.
Today is Yom Kippur. The Jewish community, my community, is horrified.
But the Conservatives say the Prime Minister's office must have known and are accusing the office of having a lax vetting process.
There was a Nazi in the chamber. There's only one entity, one group that could have done anything about it, that could have flagged that.
The Liberal government wanted to strike the record of the standing ovation and acknowledgement, but the Conservatives denied unanimous consent, with one MP saying that would serve one purpose: to try and forget what happened to Omar and wash the record clean.
All right, Annie, thank you so much for this tonight. And joining us now to discuss the potential impact of this is CTV's chief political correspondent, Vassy Kapelos. Vassy, Zelensky's speech to the Canadian Parliament was being watched by the world, and so is the fallout from the invitation and the recognition in one of the most cherished chambers of our democracy. Politically, who does this impact the most?
Well, politically, Omar, this impacts both the government and the Speaker of the House himself. Those calls for Anthony Rota to resign, I don't think they're going to stop until he actually does. It's hard to imagine a world where by the end of this week he still occupies the Speaker's chair, given the international ramifications here. Now, the Prime Minister's office insists they had nothing to do with inviting this individual or recognizing him. The Tories, though, don't buy it, and that's part of why the government is going to wear much of this. The Tories say if you don't know, well, you should have known. The government, like I said, though, continues to insist that's not the case. Take a step back on a wider scale, however. Think of the last few weeks or few months that this government has had. Everything from tanking poll numbers to a housing crisis, national in scale, to an escalating domestic dispute with India. Friday with President Zelenskyy was the sole good day this government has had in a number of months, and now it's gone. And that really speaks to the political significance alongside the pragmatic significance of what's happened here in Ottawa today. Omar?
All right, Vashti, thank you. On the front lines of the conflict, Ukraine's special forces say they have killed Moscow's top admiral in Crimea. Russia still hasn't confirmed or denied the death of Admiral Viktor Sokolov. Ukraine says he was one of 34 officers killed during a missile attack on Russia's Black Sea Fleet headquarters last week. If confirmed, this would be one of Kyiv's most significant strikes on Crimea, which Russia seized and annexed from Ukraine in 2014. A strike that has been grinding blockbuster productions to a halt on both sides of the border may be coming to an end. Hollywood writers have reached a tentative deal with studios and streaming services, but with actors still walking the picket lines, it could be months until new shows and movies return. CTV's Heather Wright with the impact on the industry.
Hailing the deal as exceptional, the Writers Guild of America hopes this agreement will bring an end to a strike that has dragged on for 146 days.
I've been crying for the last 15 minutes. My phone has been blowing up.
Writers walked off the job on May 2nd, seeking pay increases, a larger share of residuals, and regulations surrounding the use of artificial intelligence. The exact terms of the tentative agreement with Hollywood studios have yet to be released, but insiders say writers got most of what they wanted, especially when it comes to AI protection.
So you can't feed a computer the script to the last few Avengers movies and say, write another one of those for us. And that is a huge step forward.
Talk shows and game shows will be among the first to return to production. But with the Actors Union still on strike, it could be months before cameras start rolling on scripted TV and movies. The tandem strikes are estimated to have cost the U.S. economy more than $5 billion, with a ripple effect extending north to Canada, where many projects are produced.
It's been challenging for me, but absolutely devastating for many, many people here.
Sean Williamson's production company Bright Light Pictures is behind shows like The Good Doctor. He's hopeful with one agreement done, the actors will be next.
The hope is that they will use the base of the collective agreement that has been agreed to with the writers as theirs. If that happens, we're hopeful that this might only be a few more weeks before the actors are back.
But with this deal comes an anticipated belt tightening, which could also impact Canadian production.
There was just too much product out there. Now the question is how much product is going to be rolled back in order to meet this new financial reality. That could very much adversely affect the Canadian horizon.
The deal still needs to be ratified, but WGA members could be allowed to return to work before that happens, which means writers could be back on the job in a matter of days. Omar.
All right, Heather, thank you. Fresh off a successful weekend ratification vote on a new 3-year deal with Ford, Canada's largest private sector union is now setting its sights on GM.
Our expectation is that General Motors will follow the pattern set at Ford.
Unifor's president says talks with General Motors will begin tomorrow. The negotiations affect about 4,300 workers at 3 plants in southern Ontario. Healthcare in Canada remains under intense strain, leading to long wait times and delays for surgeries, and that includes children. Tonight, we're getting a glimpse of the real impact and the dire situation that threatens a child's well-being. And as CTV's Heather Butts explains, it's leading to millions of dollars in preventable healthcare costs.
Children in Canada are facing excessive wait times for non-urgent but medically necessary procedures. A new report offers a focused look at delays for scoliosis surgery, done to correct a sideways curvature of the spine.
It'll mean that when she's in her chair, she's not in that pain.
Paul Fontaine's daughter is among the thousands of children anxiously awaiting spinal surgery with no date in sight.
They're hoping within a year, but they can't really give us a time. She's on a wait list and it's priority based.
The report found 4 in 10 pediatric spinal surgeries happen after the recommended clinical time frame of 3 to 6 months. Delays vary by province, with 13% of patients waiting beyond that window in Alberta, compared to nearly 70% in Nova Scotia.
Health human resources are certainly a factor, but also Canada's information systems in terms of the flow and how kids get to surgery is critically important.
Delayed surgery can impact a child's overall health, especially their mobility.
We do know that when children wait a long time for scoliosis surgery, that the curvature of their spine worsens, the complexity of the operation required to fix it, and the time to recover afterwards all increase. And that's why these children stay in hospital longer and why they cost the health system more.
The report estimates delays in scoliosis surgery alone add up to more than $44 million in healthcare costs.
It's agonizing to see your child suffering, no matter what degree it is.
Kendra West Pettigrew's daughter has fully recovered from scoliosis surgery. They now help others navigate the diagnosis.
It's very painful and stressful on the dynamic of your family, on the parents trying to help communicate with the children because normally they're quite young.
The report recommends more investments in pediatric surgeons and nurses, along with a pooled referral system, so the first available doctor can take on patients from a central wait list. Omar.
Eye-opening snapshot, Heather. Thank you for this tonight. 3 people are dead after a fishing boat sank in the Gulf of St. Lawrence. It happened about 37 kilometers off the coast of La Tabatière, off Quebec's lower north shore. 3 people survived. The Coast Guard dispatched 2 vessels, and an armed forces helicopter was also sent to the scene. The distress call came at 2:30 this morning, with the rescue completed 5 hours later. The cause of the sinking is still unknown. The sound of crumpling metal filled the air over southern Quebec today as crews demolished a structure symbolic of the refugee crisis facing this country. The last RCMP building at the Roxham Road unofficial border crossing was torn down, no longer needed, since few asylum seekers cross there now. But as CTV's Quebec Bureau Chief Geneviève Beauchemin reports, that hasn't slowed the influx of people seeking refuge in Canada.
Bulldozers mark the end of an era, tearing down the last RCMP structure standing at Roxham Road. The unofficial border crossing gained international attention as a gateway into Canada.
Since 2017, it is roughly 113,000 migrants that were intercepted by RCMP officers.
But in March, Canada and the U.S. struck a deal closing a loophole in the third safe country agreement. It forces asylum seekers to apply for refugee status in the first of the 2 countries they reach. And now the building is no longer needed. On average, now just 2 asylum seekers a day take this path. The RCMP stopped this man less than a kilometer from the border today. Compare that to January, when more than 130 people crossed each day at Roxham Road. But that's far from the whole story. Overall, the number of refugee claims across Canada has actually gone up. It hit a record in August with 12,620 claims. Now, about a third of asylum seekers land at Canadian airports. Among them, Hannah Bakit from war-torn Sudan. She traveled on a visitor's visa in July and applied for asylum 2 weeks after landing. She's now struggling to find room in Toronto's shelters where resources are stretched.
At some point, I felt like, why did I come here? But at the end, I have nowhere else to go.
Now that the building has been taken down, police officers will no longer be patrolling this area 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. But there is an arsenal of other measures in place, including security cameras. To immigration advocates, the destruction of this building marks the final step in the dismantling of a policy that was once a lifeline for asylum seekers.
We're making the reality for asylum seekers much, much more difficult in Canada and putting people's lives in more danger.
Just a few months after tents and buildings went up, this stretch of the border is now once again a dead-end country road. Geneviève Beauchemin, CTV News, Saint-Bernard-de-la-Colle, Quebec.
Coming up, calling for justice.
We want that he shouldn't leave any stone unturned to get to the bottom of this.
Protesters demand answers in the murder of a Sikh leader. Plus, ushering in a new headliner for the Super Bowl.
My girl
The exodus of ethnic Armenians from a disputed territory controlled by Azerbaijan grew larger today. Mountain roads were jammed with people trying to leave the breakaway region. The Armenian government says at least 6,600 people have now fled over fears of ethnic cleansing, which Azerbaijan has denied. Disturbing new details are being reported tonight about the murder of prominent Sikh activist Hardeep Singh Nijjar in B.C. The Washington Post says it's viewed security footage that shows at least 6 men and 2 vehicles involved in the killing, suggesting a larger and more organized operation. It follows Justin Trudeau's assertion that India may be responsible for Nijjar's death. And today, members of Canada's Sikh community took to the streets to echo that sentiment. CTV's Alyssa Thibault reports from Vancouver.
Outside the Indian consulate in downtown Vancouver, members of the Sikh community rallied with signs and drums and flares.
We take any opportunity we can to show the Indian government that we're not going to be silenced.
This following Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's announcement that India was behind the killing of prominent Sikh leader Hardeep Singh Nijjar, who was gunned down outside a Surrey, B.C. temple in June. He had long called for the establishment of an independent Sikh homeland known as Khalistan. India labelled him a terrorist in 2020. In a symbolic move, protesters set fire to Indian flags and placed shoes around the neck of the Indian Prime Minister.
Shoes are put around his neck, meaning we don't accept this person. This person's a murderer. You know why he deserves it? He genocide our peoples.
India has denied the allegation and says Canada is a safe haven for terrorists and extremists. Similar rallies also took place in Toronto and Ottawa. The World Sikh Organization had issued a warning in advance, citing possible interference by the Indian government.
The mood here is not one of fear but motivation. Those we've spoken to say Justin Trudeau's statement that India was behind the killing of Hardeep Singh Nijjar is further inspiration to continue his work.
Just continuing with his activism is what we feel is our responsibility now to carry on his legacy.
The community says they plan on holding another Sikh referendum in BC in October. Alyssa Thibault, CTV News, Vancouver.
An Italian mafia boss who was caught in January after spending nearly 30 years on the run has died in a hospital prison ward. Described as the last godfather, Matteo Messia Denaro was convicted for a number of bombings, along with the murders of 2 prosecutors that led to a crackdown on the Sicilian mob. The 61-year-old was suffering from colon cancer at the time of his arrest outside a private health clinic in Palermo. Coming up after the break, the allegations against comedian Russell Brand and the investigation launched by British police. Police in the UK have launched a sex crimes investigation triggered by media reports about comedian Russell Brand. Brand has denied allegations of sexual assault made by 4 women in a documentary which aired this month on Britain's Channel 4. Although Scotland Yard didn't directly name Brand, they say a number of complaints surfaced after a recent television investigation. An NFL team had to make an emergency landing on the way home from a game. The Pittsburgh Steelers got on a replacement plane today after an unexpected stop in Kansas City after leaving Las Vegas. 182 people were on board, but the team says there were no injuries. The plane was forced to land last night, reportedly over an oil pressure failure in one of the engines. And singer Usher unloaded a new confession. He will headline one of the world's biggest stages, the Super Bowl halftime show. The 8-time Grammy winner calls it the honor of a lifetime. He made the big announcement on social media, playing off his 2004 Confessions video.
We're doing the Apple Music halftime show.
Are you serious?
Yeah, man. The Super Bowl in Las Vegas.
How you know?
I'm on set shooting the promo for it right now.
This will be Usher's second Super Bowl appearance. He previously joined the Black Eyed Peas in 2011. Super Bowl 58 will air on February 11th on CTV. Time to start planning the parties. And there was a doggone good time at the movies in Los Angeles, where a new record was set. A total of 219 dogs and their owners were at a sneak preview of the film Paw Patrol, based on the Canadian animated series. The movie was shown at Griffith Park in Los Angeles, and attendance was high enough to break the Guinness World Record for most dogs attending a film screening. 20 more than the previous record of 199 for what it's worth. It looks like they certainly enjoyed the show. After the break, a little robotic arm twisting.
All around, it was probably the funnest ride I've ever been on in my entire life.
The new roller coaster in Calgary that is a Canadian first. A thrill ride that is the first of its kind opened up in Calgary today. A roller coaster without a track, but with a robotic arm. And as CTV's Kevin Green reports, it's throwing people for a loop.
Rosie the roller coaster is the first robotic arm ride of its kind in Canada.
It's a 6-axis robotic arm that is used in manufacturing and fabrication all around the world, and been modified to have 3 seats on it so we can all go for a ride.
In a small space, Rosie is programmed to give you all, if not more, twists and turns and thrills than an outdoor roller coaster spanning hectares.
You're going upside down and twirling around. You experience about almost a 1.5 to 1.8 Gs while you're riding, and there's 5 different levels of rides.
Watching it from the outside is deceptive. It doesn't seem like it's going fast, but I rode it at level 4 and can attest it's a pretty wild ride, though let's face it, I'm of the age where being that dizzy is likely a reason to call the doctor, not something you usually strive to achieve. Keaton and Wyatt, however, took it to the max, riding level 5, spinning wildly for the entire 2.5 minutes. What was it like?
It was fun, like very fun.
All around, it was probably the funnest ride I've ever been on in my entire life.
Cesar and Tiana opted for a smoother ride at level 3.
It's just like a smoother roller coaster experience. It's a lot less aggressive, and I honestly felt really safe while doing it.
It was a smooth ride, but it was thrill. Yeah.
Rosie is more than just a ride, though. It's also a tool to spark interest in science and engineering.
Gives our visitors a chance to see what an actual robot in the real field of robotics is actually doing.
Rosie's also symbolic of a makeover underway at Telespark as it works to modernize all its exhibits after being in operation for over a decade. Kevin Green, CTV News, Calgary.
I'm dizzy just watching that. That's a snapshot of this Monday for all of us at CTV National News. Thank you for watching. Good night, and see you tomorrow.
CTV National News, Canada's #1 newscast. 5 crucial questions to expose the truth. Who's at risk? What needs to change? When will justice be done?
There was actually a plot to kill you.
Where's the proof? Why did this happen? Watch W5 Saturdays at 7 on CTV.